Welcome to Lesson 2 of Intro to Functional Swift with Bob the Developer. In the last lesson, you've learned how to create closure block with various forms. Today in this lesson, you will create a special function. That function will take a parameter as a closure block and also return a closure block. Let's find out how to design one like a pro. Welcome to Functional Intro, and let's talk about part 2, closure part 2. Can you pass a return a functions to a function? Yeah, there are a lot of functions out there because, as I said, closures are like functions. Well, first of all, I think I have to tell you one thing I lied last time, which is that, in fact, here we go. Boom, it's a big statement. Is that functions are actually called global closures. In fact, every time you work with functions, it is actually closure block, okay? But it is just called global closure based on the Swift syntax. So whenever you say, hello, this is a simple function that returns string, what's happening is this is also closure. If you click on it, hello, yeah, this is called a func, but we also refer function to a closure. Well, you can also say function is a verbose name for a function, a closure block. So as I said closure is like a function, but in fact, it's the opposite. Functions are closures, especially called global closures. Okay, that is one disclaimer disclosure I wanted to have. Some of you guys are like, what? Yeah, everything is closure in functions. So now let's talk about how to return past a closure, or you can say closure to a function. So how can you return a closure? You can say how can you return pass a closure to a global closure or any closure part. Well, let's review a little bit just to make sure we are on the same page. We learned how to put two values and return int, just like that, right? But we also learned that we can ignore it simply because the type is defined right above here. Or it can be also infer. Again, you don't have to memorize anything. Just think, hey, can Swift infer the type? Or if it doesn't work, then we just have to explicitly define the type. It's up to you, but just do it. And also we learn we can also return something using, as long as you define a type, you can also ignore this bracket because there's no parameter. Okay, so that's what I just wanted to review. Make sure if you're not comfortable with any of the syntax, make sure to go back to the previous lesson. Check out the article as well as the resources page. Just practice on your own, Well, I don't believe in practice problem because, well, I'm giving a little rant here because now, I'm a student I'm still a college student, but I did well academically in high school. I did really well academically in terms of the standardized test, SAT, for American school. I actually go to American school in New York studying chemical engineering. But in that college, what happens is I learned how to code. You take this computer science course up there. But what's happening is you didn't learn much. I learned about C, but back then you don't learn much. When you learn that much is actually when you're running a startup. Back in college, during the summer, I tried to run a startup making iPhone apps. But at that time, I learned so much more because there were a lot of practice problems that given by the professors. I learned so much more because I have to try to do my own practice on my own. All right, there are two definitions for practice. You can say practice law, that means you become a lawyer. You can say you practice playing basketball, you practice on your own. So just practice on your own. Okay, so that's why I don't believe in practice problems. I've done a lot in my entire life. I've been continuously studying 12 years in a row, or 12 years and more, just solving practice problems. So I know, but that when I go back to my previous notes about high school or college, you don't remember anything because those are practice problems that are not practiced by you. They were given by somebody else. It's like when you solve practice problems, what happens is the problems are defined and you're trying to find a textbook answer. It doesn't work that way. In real life situation, it rarely happens that way. So when it comes to review, some people mention, well, Bob doesn't provide practice problems. Well, if you notice the why, because when it comes to this lesson plan, I always try to give you the fundamentals of why we use them, because it doesn't matter whether we use practical problem or not unless you know the why. And if you know why, the how is the practice part, is the practice becomes so much easier. So when it comes to learning web development, server development, iOS development, Android development, I know a little bit of both because I understand the fundamentals. I know why we use Clojure. I know why we use generics. I know why we use Clojure instead of functions. And also I understand the architecture, why we try to minimize view controller use extension, why we use protocol and programming, why we use functional programming. As long as I understand the why part, the how, which is a practice part, becomes so much easier. So I hope you guys understand why I don't give practice problems. I try to give as many practical examples, but at the end of the day, it's your part, it's your job to go out there and do on your own, just like I try to do my own with my startup learning app development for the first time in my life. Okay, so that was a little rant I had because I just thought that it was important to clarify myself why it is important to understand why. Okay, so let's go back here. So anyway, throughout this entire chapter, it's going to be tough. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. The why part will be much, much harder. But once you understand, the how part becomes easier because you are going to suffer. But when you suffer, you'll still learn something. So let's go back here. Can you pass return? So let's go with the return function to a function. Can you return a Clojure block within a function? Well, let's see what happens if you can do that. And do you know why? Well, I'm not going to talk too much about why in this lesson, but you're going to discover why in the next lesson, and the next lesson after. Okay. Let's create a function called return Clojure. Okay, and you want to return something. So that means you have to use this arrow key right there, and you have to return Clojure. And as you know, let's return Clojure block similar to this. Okay, how to do that? Well, let's define the type of the Clojure block. Very important, right? Int, and return int. Okay. By the way, if it's a first parameter, you have to use bracket. That is the rule when it comes to Swift. The first parameter, you have to use bracket. And then here, all you want to do is just return, and you can use add with Clojure, this Clojure block right here. Why is that so? Because the type matches, right? This int returns int, same, int returns int. So now, when you do return Clojure, okay, when you're executing this function, it's returning this Clojure block. It's not running anything. So if you take a look at the right side, it's actually just returning this Clojure block, but you're not running the Clojure block. You're simply just have this Clojure available for you. So if you really want to use it, you can do this. Say let Clojure. Let's call it return Clojure block. Okay, and then you can return Clojure, and you can use that 10 right there, 20. Okay, 20 right there. You can also do something like this, return Clojure block. Okay, and then you can also 10 if you really wanted to. But I recommend you guys to use this way because this looks ugly. Oh, you can use this one, doesn't really matter. But yeah, doesn't matter which one you use. But you learn how to return Clojure block here, right there. Okay. But we learn how to do indirectly. What's mean by indirect? We've learned how to pass Clojure block by storing to a variable, and then we pass the variable. We return the variable instead of just returning Clojure block directly. So how do you return a Clojure block directly? Okay, how do you return a Clojure block directly? Well, let's do function. Let's turn Clojure directly. Okay, the name doesn't really matter at this point. And return. Just define the type. Again, 2 parameters. Int. Okay, here. And then here's the part you want to return. And this is Clojure block, so you got to have what? The brackets, right? And then you want to define you want to have number 1. Let's call it number 1. Number 2. Okay. Well, if you remember This part, it's like this part right here, okay? But you don't have to define a type. Why is that so? Because the type is already defined above right here, int, and int. You know that when you're working with return this part, number one must be int because you find a type. So Swift is able to recognize that, hey, number one is going to be int, number two is going to be int, okay? Number one plus number two. Okay, let's see if that works. Right there. So this is a closure block. Well, can I explicitly say this is this is int as well as this is int? Should work, probably. Yeah, it works, but you don't have to because you know that this return part will have to be int. Okay. And yeah, let's try to do that. Return closure block directly, and then you call it closure. You can use closure to add two numbers like there. Okay. All good? Am I making sense? So in this part, you learn how to return closure block indirectly. You learn how to return directly. Okay. Well, as you know, we can make this thing much more simpler. How do you go about that? Okay. Well, you know the drill. We're gonna use a $sign. Okay. Let's see. Right there, boom. To return closure block right here, $0, $1. What is $0? It refers to the first parameter, the second parameter. Okay, so return closure block, directly to, and it's gonna return closure to. Let's choose closure to. Then closure to, you have this amazing ability to use function right there. Okay. So, okay. Am I making sense? Well, I think you could, if you're still confused by that, you could define the type by calling it number one int, number two int. Well, actually, you don't have to. It's not going to work because you have number one. I just want to go through the process how things work. You have number one, right? But here you can simply ignore and then plus two like that. Okay. If this is confusing you, well, we covered this in the previous lesson. Go there, and then hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay, so you've learned how to return a closure block. Let's learn how to pass closure block. By the way, this is pretty neat, right? If you were to do it using a function, what happens is you have to create this kind of function like this, and then enter it. But now, just very simple, nice and simple. Okay, you're gonna learn how to utilize closure more and more as we learn as we go through the entire lesson or chapter. So now you want to also pass closure. That means you want to enter closure block as a parameter function. Insert closure. Let's call it closure block. Okay, but here you're going to enter something. You want to enter. Let's call this closure block, and you want to enter type of string. Okay, you pass nothing, but you return something. And how to do that? And then let's say you want to return string. Let's not return anything. So you can do, okay. So insert closure block. If you want to enter closure block directly, okay. If you want to enter closure block directly, you have to do indirectly insert closure block. And then you want to enter the type of no parameter, but return something. Let's go up here. We can use this return string this one, right? This is no parameter, return something. So it's going to return hello. So what was it called? It was called return, what was it called? Return string up here. Return string right there. So you're running it and see what happens. It's going to complain, I believe. Are you going to complain? Well, it's not going to complain because you're not doing anything. You're just simply adding it, but you're not really running the function. You're not just doing anything else. So what you want to do is, let's say you want to do closure block, and let's execute this closure block, and then just print something. So you want to print what this closure block returns. This block will return hello, so that's why it prints on the bottom hello. Okay. Or you can do, if you want to return instead of printing something, you can do string like that. So you're executing the closure block within here, and this thing returns what? Returns hello, right? So this entire function, this hello closure block function, returns what? Returns hello. Okay. So I'm teaching you how to use closure block, not so much about the practical aspect. But we'll definitely learn a lot more in practical aspect as we move along. So you've learned how to do it indirectly, but how do you also pass something directly? Hello. Oh, by the way, you could have also enter hello, or you could have enter return string, because they're identical. Again, as I said, they're identical, right? So you can do, you can also insert a closure block, as well as you can do hello. All right. You're not executing the function. You're simply passing the closure block. Okay. Boom, right there. It all works. Okay, so so now you learn how to do indirectly. Let's learn how to do directly. How to do that directly? Well, insert a closure block. Okay, and then we're gonna use. It's gonna use a closure block like that. We're gonna use closure means there's bracket, and you can do int and then return hello. This is how you do it. This is looks similar to what we've seen above, right here. Okay. Closure block, parameter, the return part. Parameter, nothing. I think you can also do this way. Right there, you can do that. Let's see if this one works too. I guess you have to do this way. Yeah, you have to do this way. No parameter in return, but as you know, there are many ways to shorten this thing. Again, if you remember correctly, if there's no parameter, you can also you can ignore the return part on the first the parameter part, and lastly you can simply say hello, because you know the type is already defined above here. Closure block is no parameter, string value, and there we go. This is how you pass closure block directly. Okay, so just learn how to use the closure block and how to pass and return to practice on your own. Get comfortable with this, because when it comes to functional programming, for example, let's say I'm just want to give you, because some of you guys are like, why do you even learn this? Well, you can agree with, you may disagree. So we have an array from 1 to 4. Sometimes you want to use filter, and then you want to filter. So this is functional programming. You'll learn how to do that later. So now what's happening is I'm just going to give you an example. Okay. So now I've printed example. It's going to give you anything that is anything is 2. You can also do divided by 2. Well, just this is an example, so don't worry about this. Divided by equals 0. And this is actually true. So now, when you do that, you return something that anything that even numbers. That's how you get the even numbers. Well, this is a closure block, and you're using this $sign here. So just want to give you an example that if you want to do this kind of stuff, you definitely make sure you learn how to use the closure syntax. You want to be able to freely use it on your own. Okay. So make sure you're ready for this kind of activities later down the road. So make sure practice on your own. So you might not find it as useful, but you will appreciate closure block later down the road. All right, keep learning, do whatever it takes, and see you guys in the next lesson. Boom. In this lesson, you've learned how to pass a closure block
directly as well as indirectly within a function. This is the fundamental root of functional programming, which we'll cover in chapter 6. So far, you've only covered the basics of Swift closure. You learned the syntax of it. From now on, you will learn to use those closure blocks to accomplish some tasks, such as making an object. As a result of that, from now on, the difficulty of this chapter and this lesson and this course will dramatically increase from now on. So please make sure to review the closure syntax, and I've attached a lot of articles for you to take a look at. Please go and visit if you're not comfortable with the syntax, and then if you're ready, let's move on to the next lesson. If not, you'll definitely suffer a lot from now on. In the next lesson, you will learn how to create an object using a closure block, as well as the meaning of lazy in the Swift programming language. See you in the next lesson.